Hello, friends. So today is Mother's Day, and maybe many of you are going to give the women in your life a nice floral arrangement, some nice cut flowers, nice vase, an expression of love, some beauty in the home. It's a wonderful thing. It's a great day to be able to celebrate motherhood through the expression of some beautiful flowers. However, there is something interesting about those flowers. They are cut flowers, which means that they have been cut off from the source. And so we know that no matter how beautiful they are, in a few days, as much as we try to keep them blooming and beautiful and alive, in a few days they begin to wilt. And sooner or later, of course, they dry out. Now, what's interesting is that if they had remained on the tree or the bush that they grew up on, their beauty, their luster would be maintained longer. Why? Because they're connected to the source. They're connected to the source. And so I thought that today we would talk about being connected to the source in a very feminine expression of our being. So what's important for us, obviously, is to stay connected, but you know what happens. We get distracted by the world. Some situation comes up, and rather than go to the source, rather than get connected, we go into what we think is going to help the world. Maybe the refrigerator, maybe Netflix, maybe the bottle. Maybe our own emotions, our distractions, the internet, all of these things that are so shiny and speak so loudly. And yet we know that sooner or later, as we are trying once again to satisfy that inner need for connection, for peace, for wholeness within ourselves, that we're frustrated by what the world can offer us. And so what's true is that the ultimate purpose of this world lies not in the world, but the purpose of the world lies in the transcendence of the world. And I would say, bam, that's a truth bomb right there. The purpose lies in the transcendence of the world. We don't find it in the world, we find it in the transcendence of the world. And we have ample support for this idea. One that I find very interesting comes from the Gospel of John, the 14th chapter, verses 1 through 5. Jesus is speaking, and he says the following: "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You have faith in God. Have faith also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places, and if there were not, would I have told you that I am going to prepare a place for you? And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come back again and take you to myself, so where that I am, you may be also. Where I am going, you know the way." Now, this scripture is often used in funerals when we talk of many mansions or many dwelling places. The implication is that the beloved who has died has entered into a new expression of living that we don't understand, we don't have access to, and so that's why it's used in funerals very often. But what's interesting is I don't think Jesus was talking about physical death. I think he was talking about a state of consciousness, a dwelling place, an inner mansion that is readily accessible to us today. He says, "I go there, and when I go there, I prepare a place for you." In other words, if I have found a consciousness that keeps me connected to the source, what I'm doing is by my modeling it, by my being in that consciousness, I'm preparing that place for you. For where I am, you can be also. And what's more, you know the way. You know how to get there. And this concept, of course, is very fulfilling for us. We remember that we know the way, and we know what it's all about. And Jesus taught us. Now, the Course in Miracles says it beautifully in a slightly different language. But the Course in Miracles says also, there is a light. There is a light in you the world cannot perceive. And with its eyes you will not see this light, for you are blinded by the world. Isn't that the truth? We're blinded by all of the distractions of the world. Yet, you have eyes to see it. It is there for you to look upon. It was not placed in you to be kept hidden from your sight. Yet you have eyes to see it. It is there for you to look upon. It was not meant to be kept hidden. It's talking about opening our eyes. Our eyes that maybe have been long closed. Opening our eyes to a reality, to a truth that is not based upon the perception of the world, but is based on a perception of who and what we are in truth. Now, you know that one of my favorite poets is David Wyatt. And David Wyatt, very interestingly, when his mother died, decided to do something. He wrote a poem, but in addition to a poem, he wrote what he called a farewell letter. And this letter is the letter that he intuited, or he imagined, that his mother would write him from the other side after her death. This would be the letter that she would send to him. And it's just beautiful. Let me share it with you. So this is supposedly David Wyatt's mother writing to him. Dear son, it is time for me to leave you. The words you are used to hearing are no longer mine to give. You can only hear those words of motherly affection now from your own mouth, and only for those who stand motherless before you. As for me, I must forsake adulthood and be bound gladly to a new childhood. You must understand this apprenticeship demands of me an elemental innocence from everything I have ever held in my hands. In your generous soul, I know your generous soul is well able to let me go. You will in the end be happy to know my God was true, and that after so many years of loving you for so long, I find myself in the wide, infinite mercy of being mothered myself. P.S. All your intuitions were true. All your intuitions were true. So here, David Wyatt is talking to us again what he imagined his mother would write, talking about her experience on the other side, saying farewell in a beautiful way. What's most interesting to me today is that P.S. all your intuitions were true. It's kind of a surprise ending there. Not expected. What is he or she trying to say? Well, I think it's what Jesus was saying. I think it's what the Course in Miracles was saying. Is that there is an inner connection. We can call it intuition. We could call it inner knowing. We could call it wisdom or guidance, or we could call it the inner knowing of being, whatever we want to call it. But let's call it today intuition. And I know that intuition is considered a feminine quality, and that's why I'm putting emphasis on it today on Mother's Day. What is intuition? Well, it's a deeper knowing. It's not based on fact. It's not based on thought. It's a deep feeling of knowing. Knowing who and what we are. And it's not an intellectual process, but is rather an inner knowing. It tells us when things are right and it also tells us when things are not right. Now, I think all of us understand intuition. We've all had experience of intuition. And maybe we want to know a little bit more, how can I access that more often? And if I were to go back to that flower example, if intuition is somehow being connected to the source, how can I access that intuition? How can I connect to the source more often? Well, one of the things that's interesting about intuition is that intuition does not tell you what you want to hear. It will tell you what you need to hear. That's kind of a truth bomb again. Intuition will not tell you what you want to hear. It'll tell you what you need to hear. The other day I was driving to an unknown location. I had my GPS there in the car, and the GPS was very clearly indicating that I needed to merge over to the right highway. Nevertheless, there was something inside me that was saying, no, it's really to the left. I had some sense of where I was going, west, east, north, south, all that. And I said, no, I really should be going this way, but the GPS says I should go that way. Well, wouldn't you know, I followed the GPS. And it did that thing. It's so annoying. As soon as you commit to the right, it suddenly changes, and it tells you should have gone left. And of course, I already knew that. Intuitively, I felt it. I should have gone left. But I decided to listen to the machine instead of trusting my own inner intuition. And those experiences are funny, but we also come across intuition when we experience, very strong emotion inside, and sometimes it's hard for us to distinguish between whether it's fear, which is a very strong emotion, or intuition, or that inner knowing. Well, something that I've come to understand for myself is that if it's intuition, I'll if I choose to trust it and follow it, there's a sense of comfort. Intuition helps me feel comfortable about the decision that I've taken. And fear is a little different. If I deal with the fear and I somehow get through to the other side of the experience that was fearful, maybe I, had to run away, or I had to defend myself, or I had to do this, there might be a feeling of relief. Relief that I survived this, that I somehow overcame it. There was fear, I reacted to it, I handled it some way, and now I feel relieved that I somehow survived it. So I come to understand that if I feel relieved, it was probably a reflection of a fear. But if I feel comfortable, it's more an expression of inner intuition. And of course, what's important for us is to be able to that we can learn to quiet our mind enough so that we can distinguish between fear and intuition. We connect with the body. And what is that I'm feeling? Is it fear? Or is it inner guidance, inner intuition, inner knowing? The peaceful mind, the peaceful soul is really key in helping us do that. So we of course advocate in practicing mindfulness, our meditative experience. Then I have 4 other ideas which I think can help us develop this muscle that we call intuition. The more we trust it, the more we give expression to it, the more it'll help, because intuition, after all, is a gift. It's a grace. It's a beautiful expression of that inner knowing that is within us. And of course, we do have our rational mind, our thinking mind. And I think what we often forget is that, intuition is kind of a gift, and I would call it a higher knowing when it's really true, when we're really on track. And our rational mind is always there. They're not in conflict with another, but really the rational mind is there to serve us, to be in service of our higher self. And we often forget that, and kind of like what I did with that GPS is we emphasize the rational mind rather than give in to the higher knowing. Albert Einstein said it beautifully. He said, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift." We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. So, distinguish there between the rational mind, the intuitive feeling, and enjoy the intuition. Be aware of when something wonderful comes up like that, and you've reacted to it. Maybe you didn't go so well for you, like my GPS example, but at least you learned something and you had fun with it. Oh, I learned something there. You can grow through that. Enjoy that intuition. That's our first idea. The second is to be in touch with the notice the sensations in the body. What is it that I'm feeling? What is it that I'm feeling? And what they call a body scan meditation. Check in with that inner body. What is going on inside? We take a time to quiet and we just allow. We allow access to everything that we're feeling, and everything can come up. Everything from pain to fear to joy to gratitude to confusion and doubt and whatever it may be. But we allow it. Scan that body and let it be. Give it access. Give it space at that banquet table of your heart, right? But connect with what's going on. When I have trouble sleeping sometimes at night, and I find that I'm in my head and I'm worried about all the things I got to do, the things I haven't done. I got the taxes I haven't done yet. All this stuff. I find that it's really helpful to be able to do that inner body scan and say, my mind's really going racing here. Well, what are the feelings? Oh, I'm feeling fearful. I'm feeling worried. I'm feeling guilty. And I give names to those feelings. And that really helps me to quiet down. And when I quiet the mind, the body can relax and I can go back to sleep. The third thing I might recommend about intuition is that you really need to allow yourself to focus on you. That's what's important here, to really ask yourself, what do I really need here? What is important for me? And if you're kind of tendency towards codependent like myself, the minute you ask yourself that question, you start thinking about others. Oh, well, what do they need? What can I do for them? How can I serve them? How can I be available for them and what they need? Well, let's just try and give ourselves the gift of focusing on ourselves. What's important to me? What do I need? And then the fourth thing that I might recommend is to take action on that. Take action on what your intuition is telling you would really serve you, even if it's a small thing. I'm going to sit on that park bench and I'm just going to breathe, look at the sky, and take 5 minutes to just be. Because that's what I understood that I need in this moment. I may be late for my appointment. I may not show up on time at home. But it's what I need right now. So what that does is it helps build trust as you take action on the things that you think that you need. And once again, intuition is not going to tell you what you want to hear. It's going to tell you what you need. So be willing to trust it, to listen to it, to go with it, and then take even a small action in that direction. That crazy thought, boy, I've got to write a book someday. Well, write one line, one sentence. If I was going to write a book, what would the title of that book be? And just write it down. What would the first line of that book be? Boom. Well, at least you've taken some action. And that's how we develop the muscle of intuition. Because ultimately, what intuition is going to do is going to guide you home to yourself. Bam. Intuition is going to guide you home to yourself, to connect with the source. So Ram Dass tells a beautiful story in his book, Be Here Now. He talks about a nurse who her job was to give chemotherapy to a children's cancer ward. And chemotherapy injected into children produces terrible effects of nausea, illness, decomposition. And she has to look for, a vein within often emaciated arms, and has to inject this terrible chemical into their body. And in the hospital, they give her a name, the main pain giver. That's what they call her. The main pain giver, because what she does is bring that pain to the children. But what's interesting about this nurse is that she has done so much work on herself. She's been so open to her own pain in her life, her own sorrow, her own grief, her own fear, her own desperation. That when she is administering that drug, she's very centered, very present, and also very loving. And the children can feel it. And so even though she is the main pain giver of that ward, she is the nurse that the children will most often ask for at the time of their death. So she is not only the main pain giver, but she is also the main love giver. And this week I ran across a poem by a woman named Naomi Shihab Nye. It's a poem called Kindness. I'm going to read part of that poem. It says, before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to gaze at bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, it is I you have been looking for. And then goes with you everywhere, like a shadow or a friend. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing, you must know sorrow as the deepest thing. So I guess I need to ask myself and ask you, where in the world does a nurse get the capacity to be the main love giver as she infects chemotherapy into young arms? Where in the world does a poet find a connection between kindness and sorrow? You know, the truth of that poem is so strong. In order to know kindness, you need to know sorrow at a very deep level. And the only thing I can say about that is that they've cultivated their inner knowing, their intuition. They have focused on their soul, they've breathed into it, they've learned to quiet enough to be able to still and let that inner wisdom, that intuitive mind, that feminine quality of intuition, to tell them what is needed at the moment. And they've heeded that advice. Maybe they've connected with the inner body. They've felt the sorrow and the pain and the joy and the laughter and the tears and all of it. And they've accepted it. And they've welcomed all of it to the inner banquet of their heart and sat down and known that through all of it, all is well. Where do they find that ability? They've learned to still the mind. They learn to accept what is. They've learned to open the eyes that were long closed. Open your eyes that are long closed. Happy Mother's Day. Life is consciousness. Consciousness is life.